Welcome to Sleep for Stories. Thank you for joining us on this relaxing and mysterious journey. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future tales. Wishing you a peaceful listening experience and a restful sleep. In the heart of the whispering wood, where the sunlight barely pierced through the dense canopy and the air shimmered with unseen magic, there existed a glade spoken of only in the oldest of tales. The glade was said to be a place of unmatched beauty, where time slowed and the forest itself breathed a song that could soothe even the most restless soul. But few had ever seen it, for it was protected by Lyria, the spirit of the forest, who had watched over it since the first tree took root. Arlen, a young scholar whose life had been spent among dusty tomes and candlelit studies, had long been fascinated by the legends of the Whispering Wood. His eyes, a curious mix of blue and green, shone with a determination that few understood, while others saw the woods as a place of danger and mystery best avoided. Arlen saw them as a puzzle, a story waiting to be told. The journey began in the gray light of dawn, when the mists clung to the ground like a thin, ghostly shroud. The forest whispered to him as he walked, its voice a chorus of rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the soft sigh of wind through the branches. His boots crunched on the bed of fallen leaves and twigs, each step carrying him deeper up into the heart of the unknown. As the day passed, the forest seemed to close in around him, the trees growing taller and more twisted, their gnarled branches stretching out like fingers. Vines hung thick and heavy, their emerald tendrils curling around trunks and reaching out into the air as if seeking something unseen. The deeper he ventured, the more he noticed the subtle shift in the air, warmer, sweeter, as though the very breath of the forest carried the scent of ancient blooms. Arlen paused at a brook that wound through the roots of a massive oak, its waters clear and cool. He cupped his hands and drank deeply, feeling the chill seep into his bones and refresh his weary spirit. The water tasted different, infused with a sweetness that left a faint tingle on his tongue. He remembered the old tales of waters touched by magic, and a shiver of anticipation ran down his spine. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden fingers of light that played through the leaves, creating dancing patterns on the forest floor. The silence deepened, broken only by the occasional rustle of a creature scurrying in the underbrush. The compass he carried, an heirloom passed down through generations, spun uselessly in his hand, its needle pointing not north, but deeper into the woods. He tucked it away and pressed on, trusting the forest's whispers to guide him. Just as the last of the daylight began to fade, Arlen stumbled upon a place unlike any he had ever seen. The trees parted as if bowing away, revealing a glade bathed in soft, silvery light. The air was thick with the scent of wild flowers and the distant hum of unseen insects. At the center of the glade stood an ancient willow, its sweeping branches cascading like a waterfall of silver-green leaves. The grass beneath was lush and dewy, sparkling as though strewn with tiny diamonds. Arlen's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight. It was as if he had stepped into another world, a place untouched by time. The whispers that had guided him grew louder, shifting into a soft, harmonious hum that resonated in his chest. He took a cautious step forward, the grass bending beneath his boots with a welcoming sigh. The willow tree seemed to shiver, and from behind its shimmering curtain of leaves, a figure emerged. Lyria, the spirit of the glade, was more radiant than he could have imagined. Her hair flowed like a river of liquid starlight, and her eyes, deep and knowing, held the color of the forest after a fresh rain. She moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, her bare feet not disturbing the ground as she approached. You have found what many seek, but never what many seek, but never see, Lyria said, her voice soft and melodic, like the wind playing through chimes. Why have you come, seeker? Arlen swallowed. His heart pounding. Her presence was overwhelming, a blend of beauty and power that made words difficult to find. I seek knowledge, he finally managed, his voice steady despite the awe that filled him. Not power, but understanding. I wish to learn the magic that keeps the forest alive so that it may be remembered and protected. A faint smile touched Lyria's lips, and the glade seemed to glow a little brighter. She moved closer, and as she did, Arlen could see tiny, glowing motes of light swirling around her like fireflies. She extended her hand, and from her palm, a crystal formed a small, delicate thing that pulsed with a soft, golden light, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. This is the heart of the Whispering Wood, she said. It holds the memory of all who have walked these paths and the magic that binds us together. But know this, to hold it is to bear the weight of its story, and with it, the responsibility to protect this place. Arlen's fingers trembled as he reached out, feeling the warmth of the crystal radiate through him the moment it touched his skin. The forest's whispers rose to a chorus, enveloping him in a song that spoke of life, death, and the eternal dance of nature. The glade pulsed with energy, and for a moment he felt as though he could hear every leaf, every root, every breath the forest had ever taken. Lyria's eyes softened, and her form began to fade into the silvery glow of the willow. Guard it well, Arlen, her voice echoed, as the light of the crystal intensified, for the forest's story is now yours. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting the glade in shades of pink and gold, Arlen stood alone, the heart of the Whispering Wood resting in his hand. He knew that beyond the trees, a world that did not understand magic awaited. But he also knew that he would carry the forest's whispers with him, protecting its legacy and pray to. A Detroitite sure about I know you're a croc, listening to the song that only those chosen could hear. And so, under the gentle watch of the ancient trees and the glistening dawn, Arlen took his first step back, ready to share the story that would change the world and guard the magic that bound it together. As Arlen took his first steps out of the glade, the golden crystal pulsing gently in his grasp, the forest around him seemed to change. The sunlight filtering through the dense canopy shimmered with an almost ethereal glow, and the whispers that had once guided him now spoke in hushed, harmonious tones, as if bidding him farewell. Each step carried the weight of responsibility, and he could feel the crystal's warmth pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. The path out of the glade was not as he remembered. Vines moved subtly, guiding him back through a winding trail that twisted deeper into the forest before leading out. It was as though the forest itself was showing him the way, reminding him that he was now bound to it, as much a part of its story as the roots that tangled beneath the earth. As the sun climbed higher, casting long beams of light through the trees, Arlen heard the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, and approaching from the shore. Shadows. He paused, eyes scanning the dim underbrush until a figure stepped forward. It was an old man, dressed in robes that blended with the earthy colors of the forest, his hair white and long, eyes sharp and full of wisdom. You have taken the heart, the man said, voice low and resonant, echoing with the authority of someone who had lived many lifetimes. Do you understand what it is you carry, boy? Arlen felt a chill run down his spine but stood firm. I do, he said, raising the crystal slightly. "I carry the memory and magic of the Whispering Wood. I am its guardian now." The old man's expression softened, a hint of a smile playing at all. The old man's expression softened, a hint of a smile playing at you, the corners of his lips. "Good, for there are those who would seek it not for protection, but for dominion." He stepped closer, the scent of moss and wild herbs clinging to him. "I am Thalos, once a guardian like yourself, but my time with yourself. The forest has passed. Now, I am here to guide those who come after." Arlen's eyes widened. The tale spoke of ancient guardians, protectors who vanished into the forest and were never seen again. To meet one in the flesh was both a shock and a revelation. "What must I do, Thalos?" he asked, the weight of the crystal growing heavier in his palm. Thalos gestured for Arlen to follow, leading him to a clearing where the trees opened up to reveal a circle of stone monoliths, each etched with symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer as Arlen looked at them. "These are the stones of memory," Thalos said, placing a weathered hand on one of the stones. "Here, the forest speaks most clearly. It will show you what you must guard against and what lies beyond." The crystal in Arlen's hand pulsed, and suddenly, the air around the monoliths vibrated with energy. The symbols on the stones began to glow, casting a soft light that painted the clearing in hues of gold and blue. Arlen felt his vision blur, and, before he knew it, he was no longer standing in the clearing, but in a scene of ancient times, a vision conjured by the stones. He saw the forest as it once was, filled with creatures both wondrous and terrible. Great beasts roamed the woods, their eyes glimmering with intelligence, and spirits of air and shadow weaved between the trees, singing songs of creation and destruction. In the heart of it all stood a towering figure, cloaked in darkness, its eyes burning with an natural's light. "This is what came before," Thalos' voice echoed in the vision. "The power that seeks to return. It was sealed away, its essence scattered and hidden, but the forest remembers, and it knows that one day the shadows will rise again." Arlen's heart raced as the vision shifted, showing figures dressed in robes like Thalos, standing with raised arms, chanting words that reverberated through the forest. The scene faded, and Arlen found himself back in the clearing, the crystal in his hand now cold and silent. Thalos watched him, eyes grave. "You must be ready, Arlen. The forest has chosen you to stand against the darkness when it comes." "And it will come." Arlen nodded, determination solidifying in his aid. His child and his crying his knees chest. He knew now that his role as a guardian was not just to protect the forest's secrets, but to prepare for the day when the shadows would seek to reclaim what had been lost. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, dappled shadow across the clearing, Arlen felt the whispers of the forest wrap around him once more, this time a promise of strength and unity. The journey ahead would be perilous, but he was no longer alone. He was part of the forest's story, bound to its forest's story, bound to its fate, and ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with a quiet intensity as Arlen adjusted to the new weight of responsibility that the crystal brought. He spent hours by the stones of memory, listening to the subtle by the use mad was by. "She's first, and the briar waters, right to shake while we extreme white hum of the forest, and trying to understand the visions that had been shown to him. The images of the shadowed figure haunted him, its burning eyes a reminder that the peace of the Whispering Wood was fragile, a veil over something much older and 60, instead of natural quackler, and far more dangerous. Thalos, now his mentor and guide, stayed close, teaching him the ways of the ancient guardians. They practiced chants that resonated with the forest, drawing on the power of the glade and binding it to Arlen's will. Each chant was more complex than the last, spoken in a language that seemed to come from the heart of the woods themselves. The forest whispered back, a chorus of approval and encouragement that strengthened his resolve. One evening, as the sky turned a deep indigo and stars began to peek through the canopy, Thalos led Arlen to an ancient grove deeper in the forest, where the trees were older than memory and their trunks twisted into fantastical shapes. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and the faint metallic tang of magic. "This place is called the Grove of Shadows," Thalos said, his voice low and reverent. "It was here that the first guardians confronted the darkness and sealed it away." Arlen's eyes scanned the way grove, taking in the way the light seemed to bend and shimmer between the massive trunks. At the center stood a stone altar, cracked and weathered, yet still exuding a powerful energy that pulsed in rhythm with the crystal in his pocket. He felt a shiver run down his spine, a sense of déjà vu, as if he had been here before in a forgotten dream. Thalos placed a hand on the altar, his eyes closing as he spoke. "Here, we will reinforce the wards that keep the shadows at bay. But it will reinforce the wards that keep the shadows at bay. But it will take more than just us. The forest will call upon its allies, and we must be ready to listen and accept their help." Arlen's brows knitted together. "Allies? Who else could help us guard the heart of the forest?" As if in answer, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and a low hum rose from the altar, spreading outwards like a ripple. From the shadows of the grove, figures began to emerge, their forms glistening with an otherworldly light. Were spirits of the forest, beings of mist and moonlight, with eyes that glowed softly like the stars above. They moved with the grace of wind and the solidity of ancient trees, each step resonating in Arlen's bones. One of the spirits, taller, Izrai, and more luminous than the rest, stepped forward. Its eyes met Arlen's, and in that moment, he felt an understanding pass between them, ancient, deep, and full of purpose. "Guardian," the spirit spoke, its voice a blend of a thousand whispers. "We have watched and waited, and now we come to join you in defense of the forest. The time of shadows approaches once more, and together we shall stand." Arlen's heart swelled with both awe and gratitude. He nodded, unable to find gratitude, words that could match the significance of the moment. Thalos' eyes opened, a rare smile breaking the solemnity of his face. "Now we begin," he said, and with a gesture, the grove erupted in a symphony of light and sound. The spirits raised their arms, forming a circle around the altar. The forest responded in kind, its whispers swelling into a song that resonated through the trees and into the very sky. Arlen stepped forward, the crystal in his hand now glowing brightly, golden rays that mingled with the silvery light of the spirits. He felt the power of the forest flow through him, not just as an observer, but as its chosen guardian. The chants rose, ancient words that called upon the memory of the forest, binding them all together in a protective embrace. Hours passed as they worked, weaving the light of the forest into a barrier that shimmered and crackled with energy. When they finally stepped back, exhausted but triumphant, the altar pulsed with a steady glow, a sign that the wards had been strengthened. The spirits faded back into the mist, their parting glances filled with silent promises. Thalos turned to Arlen, pride and exhaustion etched into his features. "The first battle is preparation, and you have done well. But remember, Arlen, this is only the beginning. The true test is yet to come." Arlen nodded, the weight of Thalos' words pressing into him. But with it came a fierce determination. The forest had its allies, and so did he. The grove of shadows stood strong, and as long as he drew breath, he would ensure that the heart of the whispering wood remained safe. As dawn's first light filtered through the ancient trees, casting golden beams that seemed to dance across the clearing, Arlen felt the whispers of the forest shift once more. This time, they spoke of hope, of resilience, and of the guardian who would protect them through whatever darkness lay ahead. And as he stood amidst the ahead, silent grove, surrounded by the echoes of those who came before him, Arlen knew he was ready. Days turned into weeks, and the forest held its steady silence, as if preparing for what was to come. Arlen felt the weight of his role more than ever, but the presence of the spirits and the ancient wisdom of Thalos steadied him. He had learned to sense the subtle shifts in the forest's whispers, reading them like the notes of a symphony. The heart of the whispering wood, now kept close to him at all times, pulsed with a quiet warmth that reassured him he was not alone. One evening, as the sky painted itself in hues of deep purple and crimson, Thalos approached him with an expression more serious than usual. His eyes, usually steady and calm, were shadowed with a flicker of unease. "There is something you must see, Arlen," Thalos said. Without waiting for a response, he turned and began to lead him deeper into the woods, beyond the grove of shadows, and into a part of the forest where the air grew cold and heavy. Arlen followed, the path darkening as the trees grew taller and their branches wove together to form a dense, shadowy canopy. The ground was littered with the gnarled roots of trees that looked ancient, as if they had stood guard over this part of the forest for centuries. He could hear the whispers change, a low murmur that carried a warning, urging him to be cautious. They came to a halt before a clearing that seemed carved out by nature itself, a perfect circle surrounded by towering pines. At its center stood a monolith, taller than any Arlen had seen, black as obsidian and smooth as glass. Unlike the stones of memory, this one bore no symbols. It exuded a dark, cold energy that made the hairs on Arlen's neck stand on end. "This is the Stone of Echoes," Thalos said, his voice a mere whisper. "It holds the memory of what came before the forest chose peace, before the guardians, before the spirits. This is Ys." Where the darkness first took root, Arlen's eyes locked onto the monolith, a deep, thrumming pulse resonating in his chest that matched the silent beat of the stone. He felt drawn to it, as though it knew him, recognized him. The whispers around them grew louder, shifting into dissonant notes that made his skin crawl. "We must protect this place," Thalos continued. "The Echo Circle knows of its existence, and if they reach it, the forest's greatest secret will be in their hands." Arlen nodded, feeling the cold weight of the responsibility settle deeper into his chest. The monolith was not just a relic, it was a prison, a reminder of the power that lay dormant beneath the roots and leaves. He stepped closer, feeling the temperature drop as he approached. His breath fogged in front of him, and a shadow moved across the surface of the stone, a fleeting shape that left him with a sense of foreboding. "Can it be destroyed?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rustling of the trees. Thalos shook his head, his eyes never leaving the dark stone. "No, it is bound to the forest, and to destroy it would be to tear apart the very fabric of the whispering wood. Our task is not to break it, but to guard it, to ensure that those who seek to use it are kept away." Suddenly, the whispers shifted into a sharp, cutting wind that swept through the clearing. The surface of the stone shivered, and a faint, deep rumble vibrated beneath their feet. Arlen's heart leapt into his throat as he stepped back, his eyes darting to Thalos, who had lifted his staff, eyes narrowed in concentration. "It is stirring," Thalos said, his voice tense. The forest tense. The forest tense. Senses a coming threat. Before they could react further, the trees at the edge of the clearing rustled, and a dark figure emerged, cloaked and hooded, with eyes that shone like cold stars. Behind him, more figures stepped out, their presence sending a chill down Arlen's spine. The echo circle had found them. "Step away from the stone," the leader commanded, his voice echoing unnaturally, as if it came from the stone itself. Arlen's hand instinctively went to the crystal in his pocket, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold that gripped the clearing. Thalos' eyes met his, and in that silent exchange, Arlen knew what had to be done. They had prepared for this moment, trained for the day when the shadows would come to claim what was not theirs. The forest whispered around them, no longer a warning but a rallying cry. The spirits appeared, their forms flickering into existence like stars, and the clearing came alive with the hum of ancient power. The figures of the echo circle moved forward, shadows pooling around their feet like living things. Arlen took a deep breath, the warmth of the crystal spreading through him like fire. The guardians of the forest had risen before, and tonight they would rise again. Arlen felt the pulse of the crystal synchronize with his heartbeat, the warmth radiating out to steady his shaking hands. The clearing was tense, the forest holding its breath, as the echo circle's leader took another step forward. His cloak shifted, revealing a pendant that mirrored the one Elias had worn. The crescent entwined with dark vines, its metallic surface glowed faintly, an ominous light that seemed to absorb the twilight around them. Thalos' staff thudded against the earth, a sound that echoed through the clearing with the weight of an ancient command. "You will not touch the stone of echoes," he declared, his voice reverberating with power that made the spirits around them shimmer and flicker. The forest itself seemed to shift, the rustle of branches forming a barrier of sound that pushed back against the advancing figures. The echo circle leader tilted his head, eyes narrowing as a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Ah, Thalos, still playing at being a guardian, even after all these years," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You should know by now that the forest's will is not unbreakable." Arlen glanced at Thalos, whose eyes hardened, refusing to be baited. The old guardian's hand tightened around his staff, and Arlen could see the faint, pulsing light of runes carved into the wood. He felt Thalos' presence beside him, an anchor in the storm of uncertainty. The Echo Circle members began to chant, a low, guttural sound that made the air feel thicker, oppressive. Shadows pooled and stretched around them, twisting into shapes that seemed to move with a will of their own. The pendant on the leader's chest glowed brighter, casting all brighter, a cold light that sent shivers down Arlen's spine. Arlen knew they couldn't let the chanting continue. If the Echo Circle finished their spell, whatever force lay dormant in the Stone of Echoes could awaken. He reached into his pocket and clutched the crystal, feeling its warmth intensify until it was nearly burning. The forest whispers crescendoed, no longer soft but a chorus of voices urging him to act. Thalos shouted, breaking the stalemate. Arlen stepped forward, drawing the crystal from his pocket. Its golden light burst forth, pushing back the creeping darkness that slithered toward them. The spirits of the forest responded. Their forms responded, their forms solidifying as they moved to encircle the stone. Their combined light met the shadows, sparking and crackling like a storm. The Echo Circle leader's smirk fell, replaced by a look of cold fury. He raised his hand, and the shadows surged forward, battering against the wall of light with a force that sent a shockwave through the clearing. The monolith shuddered, a deep groaning sound emanating from its core, as if the stone itself was awakening. Arlen's voice joined the chant of the Guardians, words of power he had learned in the sacred grove rolling off his tongue. The crystal's light intensified, spreading out like golden tendrils that wrapped around the stone and pushed back the encroaching darkness. The air hummed with energy, charged and crackling as the battle between light and shadow played out before them. Alos moved to stand beside Arlen, the runes on his staff blazing with blue fire. "Hold steady, Arlen. The forest fights with us," he called, his voice cutting through the chaos. The Echo Circle leader snarled, his eyes narrowing as he thrust both hands forward. The pendant around his neck pulsed, and the shadows writhed, reshaping into dark figures with eyes as cold and empty as the void. They lunged forward, claws reaching for the barrier of light, but the spirits of the forest surged to meet them, their silvery forms colliding with the dark creatures in flashes of light and shadow. The clearing erupted into chaos, the clash of energies sending out shockwaves that rattled the trees and caused the ground beneath them to tremble. Arlen's knees threatened to buckle under the pressure, but he held firm, channeling every ounce of focus into the crystal. Its glow expanded, reaching out to Thalos and the spirits, binding them all in a web of light that pulsed in time with the forest's song. The whispers rose into a roar, a single voice that seemed to come from the heart of the woods. "Protect the heart. Defend the echoes." With a final surge of energy, Arlen raised the crystal high, the golden light bursting out in a wave that swept across the clearing. The shadows shattered like glass, their forms dissolving into wisps that were swept away by the wind. The figures of the Echo Circle were thrown back, their chanting cut off as they stumbled and fell. The leader glared at Arlen, eyes burning with rage. "This is not the end," he hissed, before disappearing into the darkness, his followers scattering behind him like smoke. The clearing fell into silence, the air heavy with the aftermath of battle. Arlen's chest heaved, the crystal's light dimming but still warm in his grasp. The spirits shimmered, their forms fading back into the forest with whispers of approval. Thalos rested a hand on Arlen's shoulder, his eyes filled with both pride and exhaustion. "You have done well, young guardian," he said, his voice softer now. "Battle. The echoes of the past will stir again." Arlen nodded, the weight of the crystal and the forest's charge settling firmly in his chest. He knew that tonight had only been the beginning, a prelude to the greater storm that awaited. But, with Thalos by his side and the forest's whispers guiding him, he was ready to face whatever came next. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the clearing, Arlen felt the pulse of the forest settle into a steady rhythm. The heart of the whispering wood was safe for now, and he, its chosen guardian, stood ready for whatever shadows would dare to rise again. The days following the battle at the Stone of Echoes were filled with tense anticipation. Arlen and Thalos worked tirelessly with the other guardians, strengthening the wards and watching for any sign that the Echo Circle might return. The forest's whispers had quieted, but their tone was not one of peace. It was the calm before a storm, a lull that carried a warning. Arlen spent most nights by the stones of memory, seeking guidance and trying to connect with the spirits of the forest. Each time he closed his eyes, he could see the eyes of the shadowy figure from the visions, the ancient being that once sought dominion over the forest and everything it touched. It haunted his dreams and stirred a fear he could not shake. One evening, as twilight descended and bathed the forest in deep shades of violet and blue, Arlen felt a shift in the air. The crystal, which now hung on a chain around his neck, warmed suddenly, pulsing with urgency. He rose from his place by the stones, eyes scanning the darkening woods. The whispers returned, soft at first, but growing louder, more insistent. He turned just as Thalos emerged from the trees, his expression dark and troubled. "The forest has spoken to me," Thalos said, his voice strained. "There is movement at the border, strangers, cloaked and bearing marks of the echo circle. But they are not alone." Arlen's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Thalos' gaze shifted to the horizon, where the last light of day was fading. "They have found an ally, one who knows the old ways, someone who can awaken the stone." Before Arlen could speak, a distant, resonant sound echoed through the thick trees, deep and vibrating with power. It was a sound he recognized from the visions, a low, guttural hum that made the ground tremble and sent a shiver down his spine. "We must go," Thalos said, gripping his staff tightly. "The forest's fate hangs in the balance tonight." The two guardians moved swiftly through the woods, joined by others who sensed the disturbance. Spirits flickered among the branches, their silvery light guiding the way as the whispers of the forest intensified, weaving around them like a protective shroud. When they reached the clearing of the Stone of Echoes, Arlen's breath caught in his throat. A circle of cloaked figures stood before the dark monolith, chanting in a language that felt sharp and eager. Old. The leader of the Echo Circle was there, his pendant glowing with a malevolent light. But beside him stood a new figure, a woman clad in deep green robes, her hair dark as midnight, and eyes that gleamed with an unnatural light. Pulse quickened as he took in her presence. This woman radiated power, and the whispers around him hissed with a name that sent chills down his spine. The Weaver. She was a legend, an ancient sorceress said to have once tried to bend the forest's will to her own. "Guardians," the leader of the Echo Circle called, his voice ringing out like a challenge. "Tonight, the forest's true power shall be awakened, and you will witness the return of what was promised." The woman, the Weaver, stepped forward, placing her hands on the surface of the monolith. The dark stone shivered beneath her touch, and the symbols that had been invisible now began to glow with a crimson light. The whispers of the forest turned frantic, warning and pleading as the clearing filled with a hum so deep it resonated in Arlen's bones. Thalos raised his staff, the runes along its length blazing with blue fire. "We cannot let her awaken it," he shouted, and the guardians surged forward, forming a protective line in front of the stone. Arlen's hand gripped the crystal, its warmth flooding him with courage. He stepped beside Thalos, his voice rising in the ancient chant that had been. His voice rising in the ancient chant that had been passed down through generations. The forest spirits responded, their light forming a barrier that crackled with energy. The Weaver's eyes narrowed, and a cold smile spread across her lips. "You think you can resist the will of the ancients?" she said, her voice as smooth and deadly as a blade. She raised her arms, and the shadows around her moved, coiling and twisting like living things. Arlen's chant faltered for a moment as the shadows lunged, striking the barrier with a force that made the air shudder. He felt the impact vibrate through him, but he held steady, the crystal's light glowing brighter as he focused his energy. The clash of light and shadow roared through the clearing, sparks flying as the guardians and spirits fought to hold their ground. The Stone of Echoes pulsed with crimson light, and Arlen could feel the ancient power within it stirring, reaching out for freedom. "We have to seal it," Thalos shouted, sweat beading on his brow as he poured his strength into the barrier. "Arlen, the crystal, use it now!" Arlen closed his eyes, summoning every ounce of energy the forest had given him. The crystal burned in his grasp, its light shooting out in golden beams that wove through the air and wrapped around the stone. The chanting of the Echo Circle faltered, their leader's expression turning to one of rage as the barrier began to push them back. The Weaver's eyes blazed with fury as she released a final, desperate wave of shadow. It collided with the golden light, and for a moment, The world seemed to freeze. The clearing was bathed in a dazzling display of light and dark, neither side giving way. But then, the crystal's warmth grew so intense that Arlen felt it flow through him like a river of fire. The golden light surged, overwhelming the shadows and sending a shockwave through the clearing. The cloaked figures were thrown back, their forms dissolving into the night, and the weaver's scream echoed as she disappeared in a whirlwind of dark energy. The clearing fell, silent, the crimson glow of the stone of echoes fading, until only the soft, golden pulse of the crystal remained. The guardians stood breathless, their eyes wide, as the whispers of the forest shifted from panic to a gentle hum of relief. Thalos turned to Arlen, his eyes filled with exhaustion but pride. "The forest endures," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Arlen nodded, his heart still pounding. The battle had been won, but the echoes of the past still lingered, and the threats of the past still lingered, and the threat was far from gone. The forest had chosen him, and now he understood why. As dawn's first light touched the clearing, Arlen felt the weight of the crystal, a reminder of the battles to come, and the power he must wield to protect the heart of the whispering wood. And as the whispers of the forest sang a song of quiet victory, he stood ready for whatever the future would bring. The following days were a mix of relief and heightened vigilance. The guardians worked tirelessly to repair the weakened wards and strengthen the forest's defenses. The battle with the Weaver and the Echo Circle had left its mark, not just on the clearing of the Stone of Echoes, but in the hearts of those who had stood against the dark tide. The whispers of us who had stood against the dark tide. The forest, though quieter now, spoke with a renewed urgency, a reminder that while the immediate threat had passed, the shadow of the past still loomed. Arlen sat by the stones of memory one evening, the golden crystal resting in his palm, its glow a steady pulse. The air around him was cool, the scent of moss and damp earth mixing with the faint floral notes carried by the breeze. He traced the runes etched into the stones, their shapes shifting subtly as if alive. Each touch shifting subtly as if alive seemed to bring a whisper, a hint of the stories hidden within them. "You're troubled," Thalos said, his voice breaking the quiet. The old guardian approached with the careful, deliberate steps of one who had walked this path many times. Arlen looked up, meeting Thalos' eyes. The older man's gaze held both wisdom and exhaustion, the weight of years spent guarding the forest evident in the lines on his face. "I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over," Arlen said. His voice isn't over, Arlen said, his voice low. The Weaver's power, the Echo Circle's resolve. "They're not going to stop," Thalos nodded, settling down beside Arlen. The forest whispered around them, a soft murmur that spoke of the ancient bond between guardians and woods. "You're right, they won't stop. The Stone of Echoes holds more than just the memory of what was it, holds the potential for what could be. And that power is something they will seek again." The wind shifted, carrying with it the sound of distant tea. Rustling leaves, a subtle change that made Arlen's skin prickle. He tightened his grip on the crystal, its warmth steadying him. "Then we have to be ready. We have to know more about what we're facing." Thalos' expression darkened slightly, his eyes distant as though searching for an answer among the trees. "There is one who may know more, someone who walked this path long before I did." He paused, the air thick with hesitation. "But seeking her out comes with its own dangers." "Who?" Arlen asked, curiosity and determination battling within him. Selenelos said, the name carrying an almost reverent tone. "She was the first guardian, the one who helped seal the darkness away when it first rose. She vanished centuries ago, but some say her spirit still watches over the oldest part of the forest, where time itself bends and the echoes of the past speak the loudest. The mention of Celine sent a chill down Arlen's spine. The stories of the first guardian were as Guy, much legend as they were history, tales of a powerful protector who had wielded magic so old and so deep that even the spirits of the forest revered her. If anyone knew the true nature of the Stone of Echoes and the power the Echo Circle sought, it would be her. Then we need to find her, Arlen said, the crystal pulsing as though in agreement. Thylos' eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of approval in them. It won't be easy. The place where she's said to dwell, the veil of it, shadows, is a realm where the past and present merge, and where the whispers can turn into voices that lead even the strongest astray. Arlen felt the weight of the task settle on him, but he stood, resolve hardening in his chest. I'm ready. Thalos' gaze lingered on Arlen for a moment longer, and then he nodded. Then we'll go at first light. Prepare yourself, young guardian. This journey will test you in ways the forest never has. As the night deepened and the stars blinked into others, the velvet sky, Arlen sat in silence, listening to the forest's whispers. They spoke of secrets and warnings, of shadows and light, and among them, he could almost hear a voice soft, distant, and familiar, calling him deeper into the woods, into the unknown, where the heart of the forest awaited, and where Celine's story began. The guardians gathered at dawn, their expressions solemn but resolute. The spirits of the forest watched from the branches, their silvery forms flickering, silvery forms flickering like morning mist. And as Arlen and Thalos stepped into the depths of the whispering wood, the whispers around them changed, carrying a single haunting phrase that sent a shiver down Arlen's spine. Find her before the darkness finds you. With each step, the forest seemed to close in tighter, the trees taller and older, their branches woven into a canopy so dense it blocked out the sun. The path ahead was uncertain, but Arlen knew that whatever lay in the veil of shadows, he would face it. For the heart of the forest, for the guardians, and for the echoes that held their fate. The forest grew darker as Arlen and Thalos ventured deeper, each step taking them further from the familiar paths and into the heart of the unknown. The trees here were ancient, their trunks so wide that they seemed to touch the sky, their bark twisted and gnarled like the faces of old guardians silently watching them pass. The whispers of the forest were different now less, harmonious, more fragmented, as if struggling to form coherent words. The path narrowed, flanked by thick tangles of bramble and thorn, and the air took on a strange chill. It wasn't the cold of a winter wind, but a deeper, more penetrating cold that seemed to sink into the bones and pull at the spirit. Arlen shivered, feeling the warmth of the crystal against his chest as a lifeline against the creeping dread. Stay close, Thalos said, his voice low and steady. The runes on his staff glimmered faintly, casting a soft blue light that pushed back the encroaching shadows. Arlen nodded, his eyes darting to every movement in the dim underbrush. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees grew closer together, their branches entwined overhead to form an almost impenetrable barrier. The whispers turned into a faint hum, a vibration that resonated in the air and made Arlen's ears ring. Suddenly, the path opened into a clearing unlike any Arlen had seen before. The ground was covered in moss that glowed with an eerie, bluish light, and at the center stood a massive stone archway, covered in vines and etched with runes so ancient that even Thalos paused to study them with a furrowed brow. This is it, Thalos whispered, more to himself than to Arlen. The veil of shadows. Arlen felt a strange pull as he approached the archway. the crystal in his hand pulsing in response. The runes on the stone flickered, as if alive, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. He reached out a hand, hesitant but driven by a force he couldn't explain, and touched the cold, rough surface of the arch. The moment his fingers brushed the stone, the forest fell silent, the whispers stopped, the hum ceased, and an unnatural stillness settled over the clearing. Arlen looked at Thalos, whose eyes were wide, reflecting the ghostly blue glow of the moss. Guardian of the present. A voice said, soft and melodic, echoing from within the archway, "Why do you seek the past?" Arlen's heart leapt into his throat as a figure began to materialize within the arch, formed of shadow and starlight. She was tall and ethereal, with eyes that shimmered like moonlight on water, and hair that flowed as if caught in an unseen breeze. It was Selene, the first guardian, her presence both beautiful and haunting. "We seek your guidance," Thalos said, bowing his head respectfully. "The stone of echoes stirs, and the darkness seeks to claim it. We need to know how to protect it, how to stop the shadows from rising." Selene's gaze shifted to Arlen, and he felt as if her eyes pierced straight through him, reading his heart, his fears, and his hopes. "The stone holds not just the past, but the possibility of what could come," she said, her voice resonant and deep with power. "To guard it is to guard the very fabric of time, to keep the echoes of history from unraveling the present." Arlen swallowed, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "How do we stop it? How do we keep the echo circle from unleashing the darkness?" Selena's expression softened, a trace of sorrow passing over her features. "You cannot stop what is bound to happen, but you can prepare. The forest has chosen you, Arlen, because you have the heart to hold its truth and the strength to bear anew its burden." She raised a hand, and a light as bright as the sun flared from her palm. Arlen shielded his eyes as the clearing was bathed in blinding light. When the glow subsided, he looked down to see a mark etched into the back of his hand, a symbol that mirrored the runes on the archway. "This mark will guide you," Selene said. "It will show you the paths hidden from those who seek only power. But remember, Guardian, the greatest strength comes not from the crystal or the forest, but from those who stand beside you." The figure of Selene began to fade, her form dissolving into the starlit air. "Trust the forest, trust each other, and trust yourself," her voice whispered, carried on the wind as she disappeared. The silence returned, but it was different now. The forest felt watchful, waiting for their next move. Thalos looked at Arlen, his eyes filled with both concern and hope. "We have what we came for," he said, "but the hardest part lies ahead." Arlen clenched his fist, feeling the mark pulse faintly, as if echoing Selene's final words. The journey back to Alder's Hollow would not be an easy one, and the battles to come would test everything he had learned. But he knew that with the Theod after the Tyran Il Allerin Cowan, there Gina Diraton Aware the Gentle, what he knew that with the forest's guidance, the strength of the guardians and the light within him, they would stand a chance against the rising darkness. With a final glance at the archway, Arlen turned and followed Thalos out of the clearing. The whispers of fearing, the whispers of the forest resuming their soft, vigilant song as the veil of shadows faded behind them. Arlen and Thalos made their way back through the ancient paths of the forest, the mark on Arlen's hand glowing faintly in the dim light. The forest's whispers accompanied them, now a chorus of encouragement, but tinged with urgency. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the forest itself was shifting around them, urging them forward and reminding them that time was of the essence. The path twisted and narrowed, and the air grew colder as dusk began to settle over the whispering wood. Thalos' eyes were sharp, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. They both knew that if the Echo Circle discovered that they had spoken with Celine and now carried a part of her power, they would stop at nothing to intercept them. "Keep moving," Thala said in a low voice. "The forest will guide us, but we must not linger." Arlen nodded, his hand instinctively brushing against the crystal that hung around his neck. The mark on his hand seemed to pulse in response, filling him with a subtle warmth that chased away the chill. He felt the forest's protection around him, a barrier unseen but palpable. Yet, beneath that comfort lay a tension, a sense that something was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, the whispers shifted, a sharp change in tone that made Arlen stop in his tracks. Thalos turned, eyes narrowing as the shadows ahead of them began. As the shadows ahead of them began to move, figures emerged from the darkness, their cloaks blending with the night, and at their center stood the leader of the Echo Circle, his eyes glinting like polished onyx. "So, you have found the key," the leader said, his voice smooth, and devoid of surprise. "The whispers carried your secret long before you returned. But you should know by now, Guardians, that the forest's favor is fickle." Thalos stepped forward, his staff glowing with a soft blue light. "You will not take this from us. The forest has chosen, and its will cannot be bent to your desires." The leader's lips curled into a thin smile. "We shall see." With a flick of his wrist, the shadows around him surged forward, taking the form of dark, amorphous shapes with eyes that glowed red. The clearing erupted in chaos as the Guardians summoned their strength, voices lifting in an ancient chant that called on the forest for aid. The spirits responded, their silvery forms materializing in flashes of light as they joined the battle. Arlen felt the mark on his hand burn with sudden intensity. He raised his arm, and a beam of golden light shot forth, slicing through the shadows like a blade. The dark figures recoiled, but more figures recoiled, but more surged forward to take their place. The leader of the Echo Circle stepped closer, his pendant blazing with a dark light that seemed to absorb the energy around it. "You cannot hold this power alone, boy," he taunted, eyes narrowing as he raised his hands. The ground beneath them shivered, and a low rumble rolled through the clearing. Arlen stumbled, but Thalos caught him, their eyes meeting for a brief, understanding moment. "Use the mark, Arlen!" Thalos shouted. "Channel the forest's power and seal the stone once and for all." Arlen's pulse raced as he felt the warmth spread from his hand up through his arm and into his chest. The whispers around him turned into a roar, 1,000 voices calling out in unison. He closed his eyes and let the forest's energy flow through him, merging with the crystal's light until it radiated outward in a burst so bright that the clearing was momentarily bathed in daylight. The dark figures screamed as the light pierced them, their forms dissolving into nothingness. The leader of Avolvar, Shrew, the Echo Circle, staggered back, eyes wide with shock as the power of the forest overwhelmed his defenses. His pendant cracked, and the dark light sputtered out, leaving him gasping. "This isn't over," he hissed, before retreating into the shadows, disappearing along with the last remnants of his followers. The clearing fell silent once more, the whispers returning to their gentle hum. Arlen lowered his arm, the mark on his hand fading to a soft glow. Sense of accomplishment and unity filled him. The spirits shimmered one last time, their forms bowing before fading into the trees. Thalos placed a steadying hand on Arlen's shoulder, a rare smile breaking through his usual stern expression. "You did well, young guardian. The forest is safe, for now," Arlen nodded, the exhaustion finally catching up to him. But despite the weariness, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle had been won, but he knew Celine's words would continue to echo in his mind. The greatest strength comes not from the crystal or the forest, but from those who stand beside you. As dawn's light broke through the branches, casting a golden glow over the clearing, Arlen looked at Thalos and Thea, guardians who had gathered around. Together, they would continue to protect the heart of the Whispering Wood, ready for whatever shadows the future might bring. And as they turned to make their way back to Alder's Hollow, the forest whispered its song of gratitude, a reminder that while darkness would always seek the light, the guardians would stand ever vigilant, ready to defend the echoes of the past. The sun rose higher, casting warm, golden beams that filtered through the dense canopy above. The forest, now bathed in morning light, seemed to exhale, the tension of the night's battle dissipating into a soft, peaceful hum. Arlen and Thalos, along with the other guardians, began their journey back to Alder's Hollow, each step accompanied by the whispers of the forest that now spoke with gratitude and a subtle warning of vigilance. As they walked, Arlen's mind raced with thoughts of the Echo Circle and the Weaver. Their defeat had been temporary, he knew that much. The broken pendant the leader had worn, and the fury in his eyes suggested that their ambition was far from extinguished. The mark on Arlen's hand tingled faintly, a reminder that their battle had just begun. "Thalos," Arlen said, breaking the quiet. Celine's message, it felt like more than just a warning. She said that true strength comes from those who stand with us. But what did she mean by that? Is there more we need to find? Thalos walked in silence for a moment, the morning sun casting long shadows across his weathered face. Celine was wise beyond her years, but she also spoke in ways that could only be fully understood when the time was right. If she spoke of Evan, if she spoke of others standing with us, it means that our strength alone won't be enough. We may need to find allies, old and new, who understand the balance the forest keeps. Arlen's brow furrowed. Allies? The thought was daunting, yet thrilling. The forest had its spirits. The guardians had each other. But who else would be willing to fight for a cause so ancient and perilous? They reached the edge of Alder's Hollow as the town was coming to life. Villagers moved about their morning routines, but many paused as the guardians passed, eyes wide with both admiration and trepidation. The news of the Echo Circle's return had spread, whispers weaving through the streets like a chilling breeze. The sight of Arlen and Thalos, worn but unyielding, gave them a fleeting sense of safety. Edda, the elder guardian, whose knowledge of ancient rites had been invaluable, stepped forward to meet them. Her sharp eyes softened as they settled on Arlen's marked hand. "You carry Celine's blessing," she said, voice both reverent and wary. "That is a great gift and a great burden." Arlen nodded. "We need to know more, Edda, about Celine, about others who might stand with us. If the Echo Circle returns with greater strength, we won't be enough." Edda's expression darkened, the weight of many years etched into the lines of her face. "There are those who remember the old ways, who have watched and waited for a sign that the forest's guardians would rise again. But to find them, you must leave the safety of Alder's Hollow and venture into lands where the forest's whispers cannot guide you." Silence settled over the gathered guardians. The thought of leaving the protective embrace of the Whispering Wood to journey beyond into realms where its magic held no sway was daunting, but Arlen felt a strange excitement stir within him. Call to venture into the unknown. Thalos looked at Edda and nodded, the unspoken agreement passing between them. "Then we will go, but we cannot do this alone," he said, looking to the other guardians. "Those who wish to come must be ready to face dangers unlike any we've seen before." A murmur ran through the gathered guardians, but a few stepped forward, faces resolute. Among them was Lyra, a fierce and talented guardian known for her bond with the forest's spirits, and Bram, a seasoned fighter whose strength had turned the tide in more than one skirmish. "We will stand with you," Lyra said, her voice clear and strong. "Wherever this path leads, we will walk it together." Arlen felt a surge of gratitude, and Aaron felt a surge of gratitude and determination. The Guardians were more than warriors. They were a family bound by purpose, and that bond would be their greatest strength. Etta reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small, intricately carved stone, its surface marked with runes that shimmered faintly. "This is a guide," she said, handing it to Arlen. "It will lead you to places where the stories of old still live and where allies may be found. But be warned, these places have their own guardians, their own secrets. Tread carefully." Arlen took the stone, feeling its warmth seep into his palm. The mark on his hand pulsed in recognition, as if echoing the stone's energy. He looked at Thalos, Lyra, Bram, and the other guardians who stood with them. They were ready as the morning sun climbed higher, casting light over Alder's Hollow and the whispering forest beyond. Arlen knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter. The fight for the heart of the forest was far from over, but with Celine's blessing and the strength of the Guardians by his side, he felt hope ignite within him. The journey would take them beyond the known, into lands where whispers turned to silence and shadows waited. Ahead, they would face it together, for the forest, for its heart, and for the echoes of the past that would guide them forward. As preparations were completed, Arlen and the group of Guardians set out from Alder's Hollow with Edda's hollow, enchanted stone, as their guide. They ventured beyond the familiar boundaries of the Whispering Wood and into lands that few in the village had ever seen. The soft whispers of the forest, once a constant presence, faded behind them, replaced by a stillness that made Arlen's heart quicken. It felt as though they were stepping into a realm where the forest's watchful eyes could no longer follow. The first days of their journey were filled with an uneasy silence. The landscape changed gradually. The towering oaks and dense underbrush of the Whispering Wood gave way to vast plains where the wind carried a chill and the grass rustled like whispers of another kind. The sky was an endless expanse of pale blue, stretching far above them and making Arlen feel small, exposed. "Keep your eyes open," Thala said, his voice low but steady. The older Guardian walked ahead, his staff in hand, its runes flickering now and then as if sensing the unfamiliar terrain. Lyra, with sensing the unfamiliar terrain, her sharp eyes and keen instincts, scouted ahead, while Bram remained at the rear. His broad shoulders and formidable presence, a comforting reminder of their strength. They moved as a unit, each step careful, each moment filled with an unspoken bond that held them together. On the fourth day, as the sun began to dip below the horizon and bathe the land in hues of orange and pink, the stone in Arlen's hand grew warm, its runes glowing softly. He paused, holding it up, and felt a tug, a pull in the direction of a shadowed valley that lay just beyond a ridge. "This way," he said, nodding toward the valley. The Guardians exchanged glances but trusted his lead, following him down the slope as the light began to fade into twilight. The valley was unlike anything Arlen had ever seen. It was a place where the air shimmered faintly, and strange crystalline flowers glowed with a pale light, casting reflections on the water that trickled through the rocks. It felt both welcoming and ominous, as if it held secrets waiting to be discovered. Be on your guard," Thala said, though his voice softened, awe touching his features as he took in their surroundings. "This is a place where the old magic sleeps." Arlen stepped forward, the stone in his hand pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The whispers of the forest were gone. But a new sound reached his ears, a song, faint and haunting, carried on the wind. It seemed to call to him, drawing him. It seemed to call to him, drawing him deeper into the heart of the valley. The other guardians followed, their expressions a mix of wonder and caution. As they moved, figures began to appear, not from shadows, but from the very air itself, translucent and ethereal. These beings seemed to be made of mist and stardust, their forms shifting and glimmering like water under moonlight. They watched the guardians with eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, with eyes that glowed a deep, knowing blue. "You come seeking answers," she said, her voice a harmonious blend of many. "The forest has sent you beyond its borders. But do you know what you truly seek?" Arlen swallowed, feeling the weight of the stone grow heavier in his hand. "We seek to protect the forest and all that it guards. We need allies' knowledge that can help us stand against the darkness that rises." The figure's gaze flickered too, Elos and the other guardians, before returning to Arlen. "To guard the heart of the forest is to guard the balance of all realms. What you seek lies not just in strength, but in understanding." She lifted an arm, and the crystalline flowers around them began to shimmer more brightly, casting their light over the valley. "Step forward, chosen of the forest," she said, looking directly at Arlen. "There is much you must see." Arlen hesitated only for a moment before stepping into the circle of light. The world around him shifted, the valley dissolving into a vision of past and present, of whispers and echoes that held the stories of those who had come before. He saw Celine, the first guardian, standing strong against a tide of shadows, her eyes fierce with defiance. He saw battles fought and lost, victories won at great cost, and the faces of those who had carried the burden before him. The vision ended as suddenly as it began, leaving Arlen breathless. The figure spoke again, her voice now softer, almost gentle. "Remember, Guardian, that the light you carry is not just your own. It is the light of all who have stood and will stand beside you. Trust in it, for it will guide you through the darkest shadows." Arlen nodded, determination solidifying in his chest. The guardians behind him stepped forward, the circle of light growing to encompass them all. They were not just warriors, they were a legacy, bound by the forest's song and the promise to protect it. As the light of dawn touched the horizon, the guardians stood together, ready for the path that lay ahead. The battle against the darkness was far from over, but now, with the guidance of the ancient beings and the echoes of the past whispering in their hearts, they were more prepared than ever to face whatever came next. The guardians lingered in the valley, taking in the glow of the crystalline flowers and the ethereal presence of the beings who guarded it. The figure who had spoken to Arlen watched them silently, her eyes holding the weight of an unspoken promise. As dawn's light began to spread across the sky, painting the valley in hues of pink and gold, the guardians knew their time there was coming to an end. "We thank you for your guidance," Bala said, bowing his head to the guardian spirit. "Your wisdom will guide us as we move forward." The spirit nodded, her form shimmering like a mirage. "Remember, you carry more than just your strength. You carry the light of those who came before and the hope of those who will come after. The forest song will always be with you." With a final fleeting smile, the spirits faded into the mist, and the valley returned to its quiet stillness. The guardians turned to leave, the stone in Arlen's hand cooling as its glow dimmed. Their journey back to Alder's Hollow was filled with a sense of renewed purpose, but also the silent understanding that the greatest challenge lay ahead. As they re-entered the Whispering Wood, the familiar whispers of the forest greeted them, weaving around the guardians like a welcome. Arlen felt the mark on his hand pulse gently, a reminder of the vision he had seen and didn't see, and the responsibility that now weighed upon him. He exchanged a glance with Thalos, who nodded, acknowledging the unspoken bond between them. The village was waiting for them. News of their return had spread quickly, and villagers gathered in Thea Square, their faces a mix of hope and apprehension. Etta stood at the forefront, her keen eyes searching Arlen's face for signs of what they had found. "You have returned," she said, her voice carrying the weight of relief and worry. "And they," Forrest whispers of what you have seen. Arlen stepped forward, lifting his hand to show the mark that Celine had given him. "We have found allies, old magic that still holds sway beyond the forest, but the darkness will come again, stronger than before. We must be ready." A murmur swept through the crowd, but Etta silenced it with a raise of her hand. "Then we will be ready," she said, her voice strong. "The forest has chosen its guardians, and we will stand by them. The forest has chosen its guardians, and we will stand by them." Days that followed, the guardians worked tirelessly, preparing Alder's Hollow and the surrounding forest for what was to come. They strengthened the wards, practiced the chants that would call on the spirits, and taught the villagers how to recognize the signs of approaching danger. The forest itself seemed to grow more alive, its whispers louder, its presence more tangible as it prepared for the storm it knew was coming. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast it below the horizon and cast the woods in shadows, Arlen stood at the edge of the forest, staring into the darkening sky. The mark on his hand glowed softly, as if sensing the tension that gripped him. "They're coming, aren't they?" Nera's voice broke the silence. She stood beside him, her gaze sharp, but her expression betrayed a hint of fear. Arlen nodded. "Yes, and this time they'll bring everything they have." The night deepened, stars appearing one by one, until deepened, stars appearing one by one, until the sky was a sea of glittering light. The whispers of the forest grew louder, a song of defiance and unity that echoed through the trees and reached the hearts of all who listened. The guardians gathered, standing in a circle beneath the ancient gathered, standing in a circle beneath the ancient oaks that had witnessed centuries of battles and peace. Thalos raised his staff, its runes blazing with blue fire. "Tonight, we stand not just as guardians, but as the voice of the forest, the echo of those who came before. Whatever darkness rises, we will meet it with the light of the whispering wood." The guardians' voices joined in a chant, a powerful harmony that resonated through the forest and sent a shiver down Arlen's spine. He felt the warmth of the crystal and the mark on Arlen's spine. His hand, a reminder that he was not alone. They were ready. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, a new sound reached them, a distant rumble, like thunder, but deeper, more resonant. The echo circle had returned, and with them, the echo circle had returned, and with them, the battle that would decide the fate of the forest. Arlen took a deep breath, the whispers of the forest wrapping around him like a promise. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment Celine's vision had foretold. The forest had chosen him, and now he would stand with his fellow guardians, ready to face whatever shadows came to claim the heart of the whispering wood. As dawn broke and the first light spilled over the horizon, painting the forest in hues of deep orange and in gold, the distant rumble grew louder. The ground beneath the guardians trembled as the echo circle's forces emerged from the shadowed woods. Cloaked figures, eyes glinting with a malevolent light, moved with an unnatural grace, their movements synchronized as if driven by a single will. At their center stood the leader, his dark robes billowing, and beside him, the figure that made Arlen's blood run cold, the Weaver, her eyes burning with a cold, determined fury. The whispers of the forest turned urgent, a chorus of voices that seemed to reach out to the guardians, fortifying their resolve. Arlen's heart pounded in his chest, the mark on his hand pulsing with a steady rhythm. He exchanged a glance with Talos, who nodded, his expression hard with determination. "Guardian!" Thalos called, his voice ringing out over the clearing. "The forest stands with us, and today we defend not just its heart but its legacy. Stand strong." A wave of energy surged through the guardians, their formation tightening as they faced the advancing force. Lyra, her eyes sharp and focused, raised her hand and called upon the spirits. Silvery forms flickered into being, weaving between trees and forming a barrier of light that hummed with power. Bram stepped forward, his presence as solid and reassuring as the ancient oaks around them, ready to meet any who would break through. The leader of the Echo Circle stepped forward, a cold smile playing on his lips. "You think your bonds with the forest will protect you? The power we wield is older than these trees, older than the whispers you cling to." Arlen felt a surge of defiance rise within him. He stepped to the front of the line, the crystal around his neck glowing brighter, the mark on his hand blazing like a beacon. "You speak of power as if it can be claimed and controlled, but the forest isn't yours to command. It is alive, and it has chosen to stand with us." The weaver's eyes narrowed, and she lifted her arms, shadows gathering around her like a cloak. "Then let the forest itself bear witness to your downfall," she hissed. The shadows surged forward, twisting and writhing as they lunged at the guardians. "Hold the line!" Thalos shouted, his staff blazing with blue fire as he sent a wave of energy crashing into the advancing shadows. The impact lit up the clearing, sending shockwaves through the ground. Arlen raised the crystal, feeling its warmth spread through him like a fire. He called out the ancient chant that Selene had shown him, the words resonating deep in his chest and spreading out like a ripple. The forest responded, its whispers turning into a roar as roots and branches surged from the ground, forming a protective barrier that shimmered with golden light. The clash was fierce, shadows against light, old power against new resolve. The spirits wove in and out of the battle, their silvery forms slicing through the dark figures with an elegance that defied the chaos. Lyra's chants strengthened the spirits, their light growing brighter as they pushed back the encroaching darkness. But the Weaver's power was formidable. She moved with a deadly grace, her shadows weaving through the defenses, striking out with precision. Arlen felt the sting of darkness graze his arm, the cold bite of it sending a shiver through him. He tightened his grip on the crystal, drawing strength from the warmth that pulsed within it. "Arlen!" Thalos called, his voice strained as he deflected a dark tendril that lashed out toward him. "The mark! Use the mark!" Arlen's heart raced as he focused on the mark on his hand, willing its power to awaken. It flared to life, golden light spilling from his fingers and spreading out in a wave that collided with the Weaver's shadows. The impact sent a shockwave through the clearing, and for a moment, everything was bathed in blinding light. The shadows recoiled, and the Weaver staggered, her eyes wide with shock. The leader of the Echo Circle shouted commands, his voice laced with panic, but the Guardians pressed their advantage. Thalos and Bram surged forward, their combined power forcing the dark figures to retreat. The Weaver's gaze locked on Arlen, her expression a mix of fury and something else, fear. "This isn't over," she spat. "This is over!" before melting into the shadows and disappearing from sight. The clearing fell silent, the last of the dark figures fading into the forest. As the light of dawn fully broke over the horizon, the whispers around them shifted turning into a song of triumph and relief. The spirits flickered, their forms bowing slightly before fading back into the trees. Arlen sank to his knees, the weight of exhaustion finally catching up to him. The mark on his hand glowed faintly, a reminder of the power that still flowed through him. Balas approached, resting a hand on his shoulder, pride and weariness in his eyes. "We've won this battle," Balas said softly, "but there will be more. The forest's legacy is safe for now, but the echoes of the past will always seek to return." Arlen nodded, a deep sense of resolve settling in his chest. They had stood against the darkness and prevailed, but he knew their journey was far from over. The forest had chosen him, and with the guardians up by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. As the morning light cast its golden glow over Alder's Hollow and the trees of the Whispering Wood, Arlen stood, feeling the forest's song in his heart, knowing that as long as they stood together, the echoes of the past would never claim victory.